Before I can compare Pattinson to his peers, I have to first talk about his predecessors a little bit so you know where I stand on them. And by the way, this live-action list will not include Adam West's Batman, simply because I never got exposed to it. Sorry, West fans. Great theme song, though. Let's start with what I assume will be the least controversial takes and go from there. George Clooney. Actually, you know what? Let's do both Clooney and Kilmer at the same time, because they're both kind of in the same category. I'm also lumping the two of them together because they both seem like they're kind of phoning it in half the time. Val is about as expressive as Michelangelo's David, while George Clooney's. He doesn't play a character so much as he plays himself. He struts around the place all cocksure of himself and never loses his signature shit-eating grin, which really works in something like Ocean's 11, where the character was designed from the ground up to be exactly what I just described. But it doesn't make for a good Bruce Wayne or Batman. There's no pain, no depth, no brooding, no conflict within. This proved more than anything that a role like this shouldn't be given to a hyper-recognizable, iconic movie star like Tom Cruise, for instance, because they'd be incapable of making it their own, even if they tried. The public just knows their off-screen persona too well. As for Kilmer, I think he said he felt like a Ken doll in some interview or another, and after revisiting a couple scenes, I can see why. Whether out of disinterest or a misplaced attempt to look cool and aloof, Val Kilmer delivers every line with the enthusiasm of a terminal cancer patient and is half as expressive. He's like a walking lobotomy. The plot twist, however, is that I think I prefer him to Clooney. His voice and his face are a more natural fit, plus the script actually makes an attempt to dissect the character, and I feel like he has decent chemistry with some of the supporting cast, like O'Donnell and Kidman. If I close my eyes and picture Bruce Wayne, Kilmer's face isn't that far off from what I see, to be honest. For the most part, though, both of these feel like missed opportunities, so let's move on to a slightly more interesting interpretation. Michael Keaton. Every single actor from here on out provoked an outcry when they were cast as Batman, and every single one of them ended up winning people over, and in Keaton's case, I could never fully articulate why his interpretation works. I think, for one, he has genuine charisma. He's really likable, and not in a try-hard sort of way. His Bruce Wayne is down-to-earth, patient, thoughtful, affable, and more than a little awkward. And that's the other thing, both Keaton and the script deliberately make this version of Bruce somewhat meek and forgettable, which serves multiple purposes. Number one, it makes him blend in with the crowd and thus drive attention away from himself, which is exactly what you would want to do if you were freaking Batman. And number two, it makes Bruce Wayne different from everyone else by being normal. Generally, Batman's the broken one. He's the guy with the trauma, he's scarred, morose, and a little bit crazy, and it's his friends and allies that try to save him from his suicidal crusade. Well, here, everyone else is fucking nuts. The Joker's a chemically altered maniac, Shrek's a murdering sociopath, Catwoman's a walking mental breakdown with light schizophrenic episodes and dormant supernatural powers, and Penguin's an almost literal monster. Batman is the only sane person around, ironically. He's just a guy who dresses up like a freak, but who really isn't. Or perhaps who'd really want to be a freak. And another reason why he's good is because he bothered to differentiate between Bruce and Bats. He approached both parts differently, and it's a contrast that works, because without the mask, he's just a guy. But with the mask, he can do anything. Be anything. That's why his Batman is still widely considered to be good to this day, because he's both human and has a sense of mystique about him, both relatable and enigmatic. That and nostalgia. Now, of course, there are some very uncompelling things about him, some very stringent limitations.
You want to be able to turn your head.
Keaton is a good actor, and he does well in his movies, but his Bruce Wayne/Batman always struck me as one that doesn't have a reason to be there. It's the double-edged sword of making him just a normal dude. He's not broken, not really, and he flies under the radar so easily that people don't even recognize him in his own house, at his own party. He spends a big chunk of his screen time brooding in his mansion, hoping something exciting will happen, has no qualms about killing goons, which in this case only adds to his indifference, and that dance with the devil in the pale moonlight subplot that they tried to shoehorn in last second doesn't manage to motivate or include him in the story more. I always thought Burton treated him like more of a mythical symbol than a character, which definitely works for that world, but it comes at the expense of character building, I think. Also, side note, I just now noticed how incredibly horny these older Batmen are. Kilmer and Keaton's is in particular, which I think goes to show how the public eye, and perhaps more relevantly, the suits that financed these movies, saw Batman at the time. They went, okay, black latex, lots of rubber, a mask, kinda like a gimp suit. His frenemy's called Catwoman, and wears a cat suit, and she's armed with a whip, good lord. And so they approached this from a let's mess up kids' puberty with softcore BDSM angle. But then came a man who understood way more about Batman than that. And that man is Zack Snyder. I have so much to say about this version of Batman that I could fill a separate video. Suffice it to say that to me, Batfleck was the right Batman in the wrong circumstances. I definitely like the Dark Knight Returns angle. I like the jaded, morally bankrupt Batman, and Ben Affleck knew exactly how to play that. Seriously, I look at him, how wearied and jaded he is, how he walks around completely devoid of enthusiasm, raw contempt beaming from his eyes at everyone around him, is like I'm looking into a mirror, barely concerned with keeping his secret identity secret at this point, so disillusioned, so dead inside, it's beautiful. And as far as casting goes, this is a near perfect fit. There's a single person whom I personally think would be better, but that'll be its own video. Fun fact, years before BVS was announced, I used to go on and on about how Ben Affleck would make for an amazing Batman. He's 6'4". He's taller than the actual Batman from the comics. He has a huge frame, can pack on a ton of muscle, he's handsome but has a hard, blocky shape about him, just like in the animations, is a good actor, an even smarter director and screenwriter, and yes, he's got the chin for it too. However, his portrayal also comes with a lot of things that I don't like, almost to the point where I feel like this was a missed opportunity. For starters, I think he should have approached both Bruce Wayne and Batman a little differently, a little more naturally. Off-screen, Affleck is a very affable, light-hearted, wisecracking guy, and that natural personality would have been a perfect fit for Bruce Wayne. A Bruce Wayne that's easygoing but stutters a lot, who means well but messes up and ends up in a tabloid sometimes. There's a youthful, almost delinquent spirit to Affleck, and I wish he'd have had the chance to bring that forward, to trust in that and attach it to his Wayne. Same thing with his Batman. Whether because of Zack's direction or Ben's personal insecurity, he went with this cross between a Mortal Kombat announcer and Dr. Claw, further amplified by the voice modulator he used.
Tell me, do you bleed?
It's a cool take, but if you ask me, Batman doesn't need such things. Yeah, you're never gonna be as deep-voiced as Kevin Conroy, but you don't need to be. Just use the natural low register that you have and trust in it. And don't make everything so airy, put some overtones on that voice. I sound like a fussy mom, don't I? And even on the macro level, there are problems. Many people would say that the problem with this Batman is that he's a murderous psychopathic lunatic, but that's just a symptom of the larger problem. Keaton's Batman kills, there are versions in the comics that kill, it's not a crime to kill. Okay, poor choice of words. However, if you take the no-kill rule away from him, it does somewhat dilute the character. You either replace it with something else, or your Batman becomes increasingly paper thin. And that's the issue with this Batman. He's not special, not distinctive. He lacks almost all of the distinctive traits that make Batman Batman. He's not super smart, he doesn't value life all that much, he doesn't always have a plan, the only thing he's good at is fighting. Although even that's a bit of a stretch, because it's one scene we're talking about. One scene in 2 movies. He doesn't get much to work with beyond that. And if you lose everything that makes Batman special, then anyone could be behind the mask. Put any other vigilante in that costume and nothing changes. The Batsuit, the gadgets, the Alfred, they all become the accessories of a cosplayer. And that's a damn shame. Speaking of disappointment, there's a reason why I kept delaying this next incarnation. Because I think Christian Bale's Batman is garbage. There's probably nicer ways I could have said it, but why start making friends now? And no, it's not just the voice, although it has to be said that the thing aged about as well as Russian-American relations. There's a reason why it spawned so many memes, jokes, and skits, and it's comical just how much the parodies resemble the original. Same false chord rasp, same tight mask, same wide open mouth like he's a panting mutt in the middle of the hot season. Sure barks like one too. Nostalgia be damned, you cannot look me in the eye and tell me that this aged well. But then there's the restrictive suit, and it's not like I give the others a pass for it, but it's it's my long-standing suspicion that Nolan secretly hates action scenes. He employs fights and spectacle in most of his films because he knows it's part of the blockbuster package, but treats it all like a crutch because the things that interest him, like complex, multi-layered stories, puzzles, high-concept stuff, and time, always fucking time, have nothing to do with action. And I'll try not to get off on a tangent because we'll be here all day, but can you honestly say that you understand what the fuck is going on in that last battle from Tenet? Who's shooting who? Where's the enemy? What is this formation? Where are we going? Same with the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman's first appearance is quite literally glossed over. It starts off cool with him kidnapping a couple goons, Arkham Predator mission style, but then he drops in the middle of 15 thugs, and what follows is the director's way of saying, etc, etc. Frantic cuts, unclear angles, over in 3 seconds. Oh, but it's to keep the mystery up. He fucking hates fight scenes, I'm telling ya. Look at the Dark Knight. This is cool. He can barely move even after changing suits. People keep citing the Batman vs. Bane duel as the fight where it all went downhill, but honestly, if you look at the trilogy as a whole, it's all kinda shit. Everything's so obviously choreographed and the editing's so choppy. Okay, I guess I'll be here all day. Now look, Olive Branch time. I fucking love his Bruce Wayne. Bale's the only one to really turn the rich socialite thing into an act and run with it, and he does it beautifully. It works so well, and it's the best contrast I've seen between a Bruce Wayne and a Batman. He even beats Conroy here because Kevin Conroy can only sound like Kevin motherfucking Conroy. But even though Bruce Wayne is part of the puzzle, we're here to judge Batman, and Bale's Batman is so boring. He's stoic and silent and sullen and stiff as a gargoyle, which is not to say that Batman in general isn't all those things, but Bale fails to infuse him with a lot of personality. He's a glorified enforcer. He's good at punching criminals, abducting criminals, killing criminals, but he's not a good detective. He's not particularly smart. He gets overshadowed by the Joker in his own movie. For a movie called The Dark Knight, we don't really see him get his moment. He's always on the back foot, he always just reacts to things, and I know you needed to make the Joker compelling, everything hinged on that, but Nolan and Ledger reached the finish line and then kept going about another 400 fucking feet. The balance between protagonist and antagonist is a bit skewed is what I'm saying. This to me is the rich kid who gets by mostly on his cool toys and overqualified personnel, and that's why this Batman has aged the worst for me. Now for the three of you that are still here, let's have a look at Pattinson's homework. Pattinson, more than any other Batman, goes for the drained, coffee-infested, sleep-deprived, relentlessly driven Batman. Think Employee of the Month at the Chinese Apple Store. Whereas Bale's Wayne kind of didn't care about appearances in the beginning, only to see the value of it later on, this Bruce does not give two shits. He is singularly driven and sacrifices his legacy, his appearance, his money, and his health in the pursuit of this outlandish goal of his. And I think showing that is important. Bale's version showed snippets of this, which I quite like, but Pattinson doubles down on it. And I think it's easy to forget as a viewer just how taxing it is to be Batman. You're working night shifts, doing physically demanding activities that could kill you while also having to maintain a certain amount of daylight activity. Your physical and psychological stress is at an all-time high, your body gets broken down the more you do it, and you've already been doing it for years. Couple this with the fact that this is a greener Batman before he became a legend, and this performance starts to make a lot of sense. And I've mentioned this before, but Pattinson does such a good job of owning that suit. The way he moves around in it, it's like he's in this zen-like trance. I think he called it shamanistic in interviews. It allows him to maintain a certain level of mystique during scenes that feature a lot of policemen, as well as free him from all distractions. The suit acts as a kind of filter to block out any unnecessary thoughts or worries, allowing him to become this phantasm of raw thought, completely devoted to solving whatever problem lies before him. People say there's no difference between his Batman and his Bruce Wayne. I also say dumb things every once in 1,000 years. There is a difference, but it's subtle, and you don't see it often because he's not out in public often. But whenever he is, he looks a little more awkward, like he's embarrassed to be there. This highlights not just that he's not yet the Batman that we all know, but not the Bruce Wayne that we all know either. Whether it's his conversation with Falcone or him talking to the nurse, he's Batman minus the confidence. He's a little bashful and out of his element because he isn't wearing his suit, and the suit frees him, allows him to be him. And even when it's just him and Alfred, he's a bit more wide-eyed and human than when he has the cowl on. Combat-wise, he's not as flashy as Batfleck, but he's right up there in that same category. He's fast, he's mobile, the fights are for the most part believable, he's way smarter than past versions, finally, and he's completely integrated into the story in a way that many of the other Batsies weren't. Whereas Keaton's Batman was a tourist in his own films, Pattinson is hopelessly tied into the plot of his. A lot of the nuance comes from his internal growth. This is a kid who's trapped in time, who has an idealized version of both his parents and of good and evil, and puts himself through hell to defend his version of reality until it comes crashing down around him, forcing him to mature into something more ambitious than a simple vigilante. And another thing that's unique to this Batman is that his emotional arc is centered on his classic allies like Alfred and Catwoman, which you'd think would only be common sense, but he's the first Batman to get that right, because before it centered on some made-up character like Rachel Dawes or Chase Meridian, geez what a name, or on latex, and guys like Alfred were never really in the story. They just quip and serve tea. You could take them out of their respective films and the plot wouldn't change one bit. Well, I guess there was that one time in Batman and Robin where he stepped into the plot for like a minute, but here Alfred is legit crucial to the story. He is the one that reinforces Bruce's mission, who keeps him honest, reminds him why he became Batman in the first place, and serves as his emotional center. Whereas Ben Affleck played a very watered down Batman that lacks many of the character's core aspects. Robert gets most of the core aspects right, and his portrayal is the most comic book accurate thus far as I'm concerned, which doesn't automatically make him the best, mind you. Live action is a different beast and should be approached differently, but it is noteworthy. And now let's rank 'em, because people love arbitrary grades and numbers. Clooney, 3 out of 10. Kilmer and Bale, tied for 5 out of 10. Keaton, 6.5 out of 10. Affleck, 8 out of 10. Pattinson, 9.5 out of 10. There, we can both get on with our lives now. Actually, I think Bale's a 4. I guess Gotham is technically live action too, and so is this crap.